Welcome to Evilive, the live media commentary show that answers a question. Can't the Lannisters or Targaryens have nice offspring? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing HBO's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, Season 1, Episode 3, The Squire. What? My hypothesis, obviously not very smart, but it was right. I mean, Aegon is, of course... or Egg is actually Aegon Targaryen. There are some other really interesting points about this as I sort of go through my initial reactions to this episode. Is one, continually, they're all too short. I get there's only like 6 or 7 episodes, but I want more. I want to live here longer. I want the episodes to be longer. And I was like reflecting back on the reviews for this on review sites. And like professionals love this. The actual viewers don't. A lot of people are just giving it really bad reviews. It's almost rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, which is mind-blowing to me because this is such an incredibly well-crafted and entertaining series. Let me just bump up my light a little bit. I'm enjoying this so much. I can't imagine anyone not, you know? I mean, it's just shocking to me. But everyone has different tastes, so we got to move on. Let's talk about this episode. So The Squire was directed by Sarah Adina Smith. It was written by Hiram Martinez and Annie Julia Wyman and Ira Parker. And of course, it was released yesterday, Sunday, February 1. So we start with Dunk sleeping and it pans over to Egg staring at him. And I was just like, yeah, this is my wife. This is what she does. She just stares at me. I just know it. But Egg ends up going to take the horse Thunder to sort of train him in hopes that he can give him the best chance of winning on the tournament. He's practicing running and getting the weapons, a sword or lance to his knight. And of course, he's trying to train the horse to respond and act appropriately, as if this kid has done anything but watch them before. But still, it's nice to get a perspective from Egg for once, when we've pretty much been seeing this entire series thus far through Dunk's eyes. Really interesting that he is confronted by Sir Robin Riesling, and this whole idea of him challenging Egg, saying, "Do you steal that horse?" And he's like, "No, I'm a knight. I'm a knight to Sir Dunk the Tall." And he's like, "Never heard of him," and just sort of walks away. And that is the sort of thesis, I think, of this entire series, is that Egg is trying to hide in anonymity, and Dunk is in anonymity trying to be someone of significance. And these two individuals are the exact opposite sides of a coin of what the other wants. And I think that's why they connect so well together, because they fulfill within each other the one thing that they want. Even though Dunk doesn't realize it at this point, I suspect he's going to find out very quickly. And certainly at the end of this episode, he realizes who he is, but he doesn't know how he's going to help him. I actually don't either. I'm hoping that this is not the end of the dynamic by the end of this episode, because I'm really enjoying this Knight, Squire, Dunk, Egg dynamic. And with another season coming and this season only halfway through, I think we should still have it in some way. I just don't want it changed that much, and I'm afraid it will. That's life. What are you going to do? All right, so then Egg later informs Dunk that only highborn knights are going to be competing on the first day, and this is only after Dunk has been vomiting all morning out of nervousness for going to compete, because he's never done it before. And so he's just sort of terrified. And then as soon as he's told that, he's like, "Oh, well, shit, I don't have to worry about it. Well, let's go have a day." They end up getting goose eggs and making these badass looking breakfast sandwiches and indulging in them. And what we're seeing is this relationship building layer by layer, stronger and stronger, each new experience that these two have together. And as hard as Dunk had it as a squire, he's trying to pass that on to Egg, but he bends more, you know, rather than smacking him or punching him whenever he doesn't listen exactly and doing the exact thing, is he's listening and he's learning. And I think that's a wonderful trait of any sort of parent-child relationship, is you have to bend and you have to listen. And yes, you have to provide structure and make sure that there's lines that aren't crossed, but you also want them to be strong adults eventually, which means they have to challenge you, and you have to allow them to challenge you and to stand up to you and test boundaries. And you have to expect that they're going to do that because you did that. So I think Dunk is doing everything right here as a mentor to a mentee, to a mentos. And I just love this dynamic between the two of them. So much so that they're actually just starting to be wistful and dream about a future, together, where they're like living in this region. They have their own farm and they married the, two lords and first and second daughters and stuff like that. Really, really great stuff. Tenzel says that his shield's going to be ready that night, but we never actually get to that point because life happens. I should say because Targaryens happen. There's always at least one shit disturber in any brood of Targaryen. And they have more than their fair share of shit disturbers. And we really got one today. Well, in this episode, I should say. So Egg requests to Squire for Dunk permanently while they're just sort of riffing about the future. And then they're sort of interrupted by Plumber, who takes Dunk aside and he's like, look, we need to make some cash. You need to make some cash. How about we indulge in a little bit of tomfoolery and we rig your first match? And Dunk is beside him. He's like, what? No, I don't want to win it unless I've earned it. And he's like, but haven't you earned it already? Haven't you really? You've gone to all this length and you're now a knight on the lists. And like, isn't that enough? Like, don't you want victory? And what this says is that no one has faith that Dunk's going to be able to do anything. And so they have the ability to try to leverage him through cheating. And that's just not who Dunk is. And I'm hoping that he resists the urge when it comes, if it ever comes after this episode. But I'm hoping that he doesn't do that, because part of what is so great about Dunk is his naive outlook on life, on what a knight is supposed to be, while he's staring in the face of what knights actually are and how horrible they are. And I like his version of knights, because that's the knight I grew up with. That whole King Arthur, Sir Lancelot, Sir Gawain type approach to knighthood. And I don't know. I like that version of it. So he asked Dunk to take part in a rigged joust against Lord Ashfur's son, Sir Andrew, to recoup some of the money spent on hosting the tournament. And he gives him a day to decide. And Dunk doesn't seem like he's going to be deciding anytime soon. So during a jousting match, Aerion Targaryen comes out, the prince, and he murders a horse intentionally. And this throws Dunk for a loop, because he's like, oh, that was a horrible accident. And everyone's like, that was not an accident. And we have this really great back and forth between him and another squire. Like, look, they're aliens, man. Targaryens are not normal people. They're inbred. They're monsters. And yeah, they act that way. So how could they not be seen that way? And when it happens, it is such an upset that the crowd starts surging out toward the prince to presumably enact frontier justice. And look, the Targaryens in this time don't have their dragons. They don't have that tour de force to prevent the small folk from rising up against them, especially when it's just one dude on a horse in the middle of a tournament field. Like, that's a really dangerous situation. And what it does is it strikes a chord in Aerion, which I think is the catalyst for how he reacts later on. He knows that he's vulnerable here, and he wants to make sure everyone understands that the Targaryens don't need dragons. They are the dragons, and that you cannot stand against a dragon. So we'll put a pin in that, because it's going to come up later at the end. And then we see this really interesting fortune teller that comes up and just says the straight up truth, which shocks Egg. He's like, why did she say that? Because he's like going to burn up in fire and stuff. And I'm trying to do the mental math, because someone told me a spoiler that I haven't repeated to anyone but my wife. And if that if the fortune teller was right, then that spoiler was not. And that makes me happy because it wasn't spoiled. So I really like that. But it is important to note that Dunk and Egg are indelibly linked and known figures in Westeros. I mean, at the very beginning of Game of Thrones, this TV series, when it first originally aired, the sort of maiden that was looking over Bran when he was sick asked if she could tell him a story about Sir Duncan the Tall. And that was at the very beginning of the series. So clearly George R.R. Martin loves these characters. And even at the while they were putting together season 3 of House of the Dragon, which is the other Game of Thrones series that HBO is putting out right now, they said straight up, George R.R. Martin doesn't care about this season 3 of this show. He doesn't care about this at all. He only cares about A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. And I get it because they're wonderful characters that he created, and he's having a blast seeing what he wrote come to life as he wrote it in real life. Whereas Game of Thrones and House of the Dragons have deviated from what he's written. And so that's got to be frustrating for him. So he's going to clearly spend more time with those people who are being more faithful to his writing. And it bears out that he does. In any case, the fortune teller really gives some suggestions about not only how Egg is going to die in flames, but that Sir Duncan is going to end up wildly wealthy, which is interesting. What I also really loved about it is that Egg took it all seriously, and Dunk was just like, this is just someone, trying to entertain us. It's not real. It's not serious. So ultimately, Dunk and Raymond discuss Aeryn's jousting match, and Raymond expresses his hatred for the Targaryens. That's where he says they're aliens and they're inbred and stuff. And Raymond's 100% right in the situation. Dunk just doesn't have the knowledge and experience to recognize them for the monsters that they can be, because he's just been an ignorant hedge knight or a hedge knight's squire for his entire life. So he doesn't know about world politics or global machinations. He's ignorant to all of that. And arguably that's why we like him so much, is because he's not caught up in all that bullshit. He's only focused on what he's doing in that day and how he can improve the situation and live up aspirationally to what he always believed knights were and are. And it's a beautiful thing. All right, so next, Egg watches one of Tancel's performances that portrays the dragon being killed, and this is where Aerion loses his mind. He just almost got round up by the small folk for killing that horse in the tournament, and now he's feeling a little bit vulnerable, and he just witnesses a play with puppets and a dragon slaying. He literally sees himself, as do most Targaryens, as the dragon, as literally the blood of the dragon. And so he's like, look, no, we cannot let people think that dragons are not always on top, because that means that they're going to try to overthrow us. We have to be consistently stating that no one defeats a dragon. Dragons always win. We will always be in control. And so he goes and starts abusing this woman. Egg, beside himself, really hates his brother, doesn't know what to do, and he knows that Dunk likes this girl, so he goes and tells him what's happening. As soon as Dunk sees it and Aerion breaks her finger, Tanzel's finger, Dunk snaps, and he immediately goes into, I'm going to defend this person that I care about mode. And look, anyone who's ever had to deal with conflict, like someone they care about is being beaten up or whatever, you understand this feeling. If someone you care about is hurt, you don't care about anything else. You just need to stop it and hurt the person who's doing the hurting. Teach them a lesson. You don't get to hurt someone I love. And that's what Dunk does. He goes up and he beats the shit out of Aerion. But Aerion's a Targaryen and a prince. You can't do that. You're a nobody, Dunk. And so he's got his guards, and they're literally ready to pull some American History X curb stomping on his ass when Egg, finally unable to hide his heritage anymore, straight up comes out and says, put him down or you're going to have to face my father. And Aerion's like, you little rat, what happened to your hair? What'd you do? And he's like, I didn't want to look like you. I shaved it. Revealing that he is in fact Aegon Targaryen, the missing child, and that changes the dynamic completely between Dunk and Egg. Now, I can't wait to see the fallout, because is Egg going to be able to save Dunk? I mean, he's just a kid. He's a stupid little kid. What pull could he possibly have over precedent and the history of Targaryens and the lineage? I mean, Aeryn's the prince. Aegon's not a prince yet. I mean, I guess he is kind of a prince in waiting, but he's not close to being on the throne at all. And Aeryn's infinitely closer to being on the throne. So and he's the one that was affronted. So who are they going to listen to? What's the fallout? You know, we saw a teaser, but I'm not going to get into the teasers and stuff. So I think it's very, very fascinating that we saw this reveal this early on. I thought it would be something that was kept a secret for a really long time. And I'm really surprised that third episode, halfway through the first season, it's sort of set up. And now I'm just terrified that we're not going to have Dunk and Egg anymore. We're just going to have Dunk over here and Egg over there. What was so enjoyable about this series is their interactions together and their building of a relationship and genuinely caring for one another, and seeing how Dunk treats him and how Egg then reciprocates, and how together they actually create a really good team of Knight and Squire facing off against established dichotomies that are sort of corrupt and vile in expression. I'm really excited to see how this moves forward, and I just really, really love this episode. Because of all of that, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. Again, I can't give it a 5 if it's too short. This is way too short. It's not long enough. I loved it. It should be a 5, but I've got to penalize it for the duration, for the length. It's just not long enough. And that's a good thing, because they're leaving you wanting more, but it's frustrating for me. That being said, my favorite part of this episode had to be Dunk just snapping and beating the shit out of Prince Aeryn Targaryen. I loved that. And I loved the consequence was potentially him getting his teeth knocked out and then being murdered. You don't fuck around with Targaryens. They're in a position of power for a reason. They're ruthless and brutal, especially Aeryn. And I love how he's portrayed by the actor that portrays him, because you do very much feel that villainy evident in his actions, in his mannerisms, in the way he speaks, everything. It's really, really great. They just did such a good job with this. My least favorite part, it's just the length. That's it. I love this show. I can't imagine why other people, if it's because of the huge cock, if it's because of him having diarrhea on episode 1, if it's because of the horse shitting in episode 3, I don't understand it. You can't look past one gag, like one ridiculous gag. And all it was there to do was to lay a groundwork of saying, this is not the Game of Thrones you expect. This is the small person Game of Thrones. If you can't look past that, you shouldn't be watching this anyway, because you're just a boring person who can't get out of their own way in life. So bugger off and go watch something that you enjoy. Let those of us who passionately love this, let people know that, you know, this is something you should give it a shot. It is so much more entertaining than anything else that I'm watching right now, or anything that I've watched in the past year and a half that I've been waiting for the next season of House of the Dragon. And I complained way more about House of the Dragon than I ever have of this so far. And I'm hoping that stays the case, because this is just gold. I love how it's interwoven with the history of Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. I love how passionate the author, George R.R. Martin, is about this story, and how passionate the the showrunners are with the source material, that they're staying so faithful to it. It makes it really fun for us fans to see all that interconnectivity and all that connective tissue play out, and then extrapolate through this wonderful history that this author has put together of this incredible world of Game of Thrones. So do yourself a favor, check it out. That is it. Thank you to creator patron Aaron Hardy, producer patron Azrael, developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz, and all of the YouTube members. As always, like it or not, evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there and be evil.